Good morning and welcome to today's Almost Daily Devotional. We are reading in the Gospel of John, chapter 6, starting with the first verse. After this, Jesus went across the Galilee Sea, that is the Tiberias Sea. A large crowd followed him because they had seen the miraculous signs he had done among the sick. Jesus went up a mountain and sat there with his disciples. It was nearly time for Passover, the Jewish festival. Jesus looked up and saw the large crowd coming toward him. He asked Philip, "Where will we buy food to feed these people?" Jesus said this to test him, for he already knew what he was going to do. Philip replied, "More than a half-year's salary worth of food wouldn't be enough for each person to have even a little bit." One of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, said, "A youth here has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. But what good is that for a crowd like us?" Jesus said, "Have the people sit down." There was plenty of grass there. They sat down, about 5,000 of them. Then Jesus took the bread. When he had given thanks, he distributed it to those who were sitting there. He did the same with the fish, each getting as much as they wanted. When they had plenty to eat, he said to his disciples, "Gather up the leftover pieces so that none will be wasted." So they gathered them up and filled 12 baskets with the pieces of the 5 barley loaves that had been left over by those who had eaten. When the people saw that he had done a miraculous sign, they said, "This is truly the prophet who is coming into the world." Jesus understood that they were about to come and force him to be their king, so he took refuge again, alone on a mountain. So the story is one about a person or people who have nothing. They have few resources. They have a limited access to more resources. It's about a group of people who are on limited incomes, who are part of a small congregation of disciples. And yet we see in the story, in the hands of Jesus, that even little things, even small things, can become abundant, can become many things. The few can become many. And maybe that doesn't mean in numbers. Maybe the few don't become, go from 12 disciples to thousands like they did with Jesus. But those 12 disciples can make a big impact in the world. The weak, the few, the what seems insignificant can become powerful in the hands of God. What's most interesting about this passage to me, though, that I've never noticed, is how it closes. Jesus is refusing to take the power that they want to impose upon him. He refuses to be taken by force and made king in the end. And his disciples try to force him onto the boat so that Jesus can be separated from humanity. And he refuses that portion too. He refuses that kind of power, that separation from humanity. And so he makes it clear that he came not to be powerful in the eyes of the world. He came not to be king in the world and take that kind of power into his hands. And he came not to be separate from the weak, came not to be separate from the few, but to be in the midst of them. This incarnation is not going to be co-opted by humans or turned into a power game or equated with numbers and with sizes of crowds, but on the impact that the ministry is making, the impact of the incarnation in people's lives. And so how do we measure success? How do we measure God's influence and God's impact in the world and in our lives? And how do we measure our impact in other people's lives? Is it by numbers? Is it by influence? Is it by how lives are changed? What measurement would God use?